Today's passage is Galatians chapter 5 verses 7 through 12. Let's read together. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. I am confident in the Lord that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be, will have to pay the penalty. Brothers and sisters, if I am still preaching circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been abolished. As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Amen. I bless all of you who have gathered before the Lord at this early hour to build an altar of worship. I believe that God will look upon us and commend us, saying, "Well done." The Apostle Paul often described the Christian life as a race. In today's passage, verse 7 also uses this imagery, saying, "You were running a good race." We often compare the life of faith to a marathon, not a sprint. The reason for this comparison is that our walk with God requires great patience and consistency. A sprint requires a burst of speed and power, but a marathon is different. You have to maintain a steady pace for a long time. If you run too fast, you'll burn out. If you run too slowly, you may not finish the race. To succeed, you must consistently maintain your own pace. This is why marathon training is so difficult. I have a friend who is a marathon runner. When I hear about his training regimen, his strict diet, and his lifestyle, it's truly astonishing. What's surprising is that even though he's a professional athlete, he says he feels like giving up every time he competes. It's painful, difficult, and exhausting. But he refocuses his mind, using mental discipline to overcome the temptation, and keeps running. Ultimately, he says he perseveres because there is a finish line, and he keeps his eyes fixed on that goal. Listening to his story, I thought, that's what it means to be a professional. Our life of faith is much the same. It doesn't end with simply joining a church and confessing that you believe in Jesus. The life of faith is a race, and the journey itself is what matters. Once we begin at the starting line, we must run without stopping until we reach the finish. This race is not meant to be finished in a short period. Like a marathon, we must consistently keep the faith for a long time, for our entire lives. To maintain that faith and run to the very end, we need training. To finish this race, it takes more than just showing up. We must continuously train our faith. Therefore, in our spiritual lives, we must prepare ourselves through the discipline of prayer, studying the Word, and pursuing godliness. When trials come, it is human nature to want to stop. The temptation to give up is real, but we must press forward, looking only to the Lord. In a sense, we are also professionals in faith. When we feel like stopping, when we are tired and about to fall, we must continue to train and run diligently, looking only to God who is at the finish line. If we do, the crown and glory that God has prepared will be waiting for us. This is how we must consistently run forward. So, for us to run consistently to the end, there are three things we must remember from today's passage. First, we must obey the truth. Let's read verse 7 together. You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? Amen. Paul lamented that the Galatian church, which had been running so well, had been stopped in its tracks. There was an obstacle, something obscuring the gospel. It was the influence of people who taught that in addition to salvation through the all-sufficient grace of Jesus Christ and his cross, adherence to the law was also required. On the surface, this teaching looked plausible, and even highly spiritual, but in reality, it nullified the power of the cross. Therefore, we must always examine ourselves. We need to ask, am I obeying the truth? Am I believing the gospel fully and without compromise? When we are firmly grounded in the truth, we will not be shaken, no matter what obstacles come our way. We can overcome and conquer any hindrance. The original Greek word for hinder here literally means to cut into a road, referring to the act of illegally interfering with a runner's race. When we think about our own lives of faith, how many things are there that hinder us? How many obstacles surround us? It is no exaggeration to say that our lives are full of them. In our relationships and our circumstances, so many things can prevent us from seeing the truth for what it is. So many things try to undermine our faith. The world's values are a constant pressure, as are the words and opinions of people around us. Within our own hearts, we battle greed and fear. There are also false spiritual teachings. We often don't even realize how many things in life are trying to hinder us, but we must remember what verse 8 says, that kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. These hindrances are not from God. We must obey the truth. This is the will of God. We must not stumble over any obstacle or stop because of any hindrance. I pray that you and I will be vigilant against anything that blocks the truth, and that we will obey it completely. Second, we must beware of the yeast. Let's read verse 9 together. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Yeast is subtle. A small amount permeates the entire batch of dough and transforms it. In the Bible, yeast is used in two ways, negatively and positively. In a negative sense, it represents sin, false teaching, and hypocrisy. In a positive sense, as in the parable of the kingdom of heaven, it represents the powerful, spreading influence of the gospel. While both meanings exist, today's passage uses yeast in its negative sense. It refers to a small distortion that corrupts the gospel. It might be a teaching that seems insignificant or an act of disobedience that seems minor, but the passage warns that if left unchecked, it will eventually contaminate one's entire faith. The small teaching of legalism that entered the Galatian church threw the entire church into confusion. It eventually caused them to stop their race, stray from the truth, and depart from the gospel. For us too, there is always yeast trying to creep in. It comes in the form of small compromises where we think, this much should be okay, right? Or, it's probably fine to let this one slide. We might tell ourselves, it's okay to skip my Bible reading just once today. But before long we find ourselves distant from the Word. It's okay to miss prayer just this once. And soon, we fall into spiritual lethargy. It starts as just one small thing, one small compromise in our life of faith, but it can lead to a major crisis. A single complaint can shake our entire life and poison the atmosphere of our community. We think of these as small and simple things, but their impact is anything but small. A minor sin or a single act of disobedience can eventually shake our faith to its core. Just as a single spark can start a forest fire, that one small thing can tear down everything we've built. Therefore, we must be on guard against the little yeast of impurity in our faith. We must remain vigilant and maintain consistency in our spiritual journey. I pray that you and I will be people who do so. Third, we must not adopt a different mindset. Let's read verse 10 together. I am confident in the Lord that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be, will have to pay the penalty. A different mind is a mindset that has strayed from the gospel. It is a way of thinking that has departed from the truth to embrace something else. What was this different mind in the Galatian church? As we have been meditating on daily, it was a legalistic mindset. It was the idea that faith in Jesus alone is not enough, that one must also be circumcised and keep the law to be made righteous. It is also a mindset that is preoccupied with the opinions of others. It is a way of thinking that is more concerned with what people say, what people think, and how people see us, than with the grace of God. Such mindsets bring division and confusion. Division arises when claims that depart from the gospel are continually made and accepted. Ultimately, it is the mindset that tries to add other conditions, other standards, and other paths to the finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross. The message is clear. Do not entertain such a way of thinking. Paul strongly proclaims that whoever throws you into confusion will face God's judgment. What are our hearts like today? Are there any alternative ways of thinking that prevent us from focusing solely on God and the gospel? We must examine ourselves, and if we find any, we must boldly cut them off. Our hearts must be rooted only in God and in the gospel. Only then can we remain unshaken. We must cast away every competing mindset. Only then can our faith remain steadfast to the end. I pray that you and I will reject every other view and hold only to the gospel. Through today's message, we have learned how we should run the race of faith and what we must guard against along the way. Remembering this word, my prayer for you is that today will be a day where we commit ourselves anew, saying, let us obey the truth, beware of the little yeast, and refuse any mindset other than the gospel. Let us hold to the gospel, and the gospel alone, as we run our race.